Hey guys, this is Colin from Blackjack Apprenticeship, and I am joined by my co-host, Joe748. How's it going?
Wow, official co-host.
Official.
I've been hearing more and more lately. People are like, hey, I recognize you from the podcast, not from just being a blackjack player.
Yeah, yeah. Well, glad to be here with you. So we're doing a mailbag episode. We sent out kind of a thing on different social media platforms and in our forum, and man, we got, it was like 113 questions.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And I even forgot to post it to a couple social media things, but we're going to get through what we can get through right now.
First, some sad local Vegas news. They no longer carry Slingshot cold brew here in any of the stores, so we're screwed.
Yeah, and we're going to power through this without Slingshot coursing through our veins. But yeah, for those who have not had Slingshot cold brew coffee, our unofficial sponsor, they pay us nothing to say this. If you can find it at like a Sprouts or not a Sprouts in Vegas anymore, but whatever, like a local grocer.
Yeah, usually if they sell a lot of different types of granola or sprouted bread, they're going to have Slingshot.
Yeah, go to your local hipster grocery store and look for Slingshot coffee. It's the best. And RIP Mint Thing.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
For those who are around like 4 or 5 years ago, Mint Thing was a cold brew coffee that Joe748 helped bring to the market and then decided to shut it down.
You can still get it locally if you're in Portland, Oregon at Tove Coffee. They still sell it, but yeah, no longer in stores. But anyway.
To blackjack. Here we go. So we kind of have this organized a little bit, but we're just going to go question by question, starting with Joe. How perfect is perfect? Surely even pros make mistakes. Is 98% on the test out module good enough? 99%.
That's a good question. Yes, we do make mistakes. I've seen it happen to myself. We've seen it happen, in practice. Every once in a while you just have a mental flub, but I mean, you have to get tested out eventually by someone, even if you have a certain score on the training module. I mean, ideally, you want it to be 100% because that's when it's the easiest.
Yeah, my take is if you're not 100% on the training module, then you're too far from perfect in reality. Like, I would bet $10,000 that Joe could test me out right now. I could test Joe out and we would pass. And we're still not perfect in hour 6 of a session and you're playing fast. You might make a mistake, but you want those mistakes to be so few and far between that's not impacting your EV. If you can't make it through a couple shoes on a computer without any of the pressures of the casino, distractions of the casino, then I would say you're not close enough. And you got to remember the training module is the best we can provide of a virtual environment. It doesn't replace getting tested out by a real person dealing to you that can, run you through the ringer. I understand the question. And I also understand the frustration when you're like, I'm 98%, isn't that good enough? But I would say it's not, and don't cut yourself short. I mean, I say this, I'm starting to repeat it as a mantra, that if you're 98%, you're going to have all the downsides of card counting, the variance, the heat and back-offs, but you're not going to have all the profits. And why would you want to go through all the downsides without all the profits? So you do yourself a favor and get to perfect, knowing that, nobody can be perfect every hand for countless hours. But it should be that a mistake is the very, very rare exception, not the like, oh, it happens every shoe or every 3 shoes.
Speaking of test outs, can you kind of go through what your guys' requirements were for your team as far as passing a test out and how that changed over time?
Yeah, we kind of just stole it's not stealing, but we took the test out criteria from another large team. So what it was is we dealt a couple shoes and you could get off by a running 1 once per shoe. If you got off by a running 2, that wasn't good enough. If you got off by 1 more than once in the shoe, that wasn't good enough. We front loaded it, meaning like they were going to get really difficult, lots of changing bets, lots of deviations, all that stuff. We did mispay errors, all that. They could not make any other mistake. They couldn't make a basic strategy, a deviation, or a betting mistake at all. They had to catch mispays. The mispays thing was something we added like year 2 or 3 of the church team because it happens. And if you're missing those in a casino, those can really add up. And we made people test out not once. That was the other thing we learned. At first, it was you test out and we're like, okay, you're perfect and you'll always be perfect. Then we realized, no, that's not true. People will train like crazy to get to perfect, and then they'll kind of let their skills slide over time. It's just human nature. It was like every month, people had to get together with another church team member and test each other out. If the person didn't pass, they couldn't go on a trip until they had tested out again. And if I had to do over, that would definitely be like the minimum standards for me for a team, because again, you want to be losing because it's the math of the game, not because there's anything else going on. And if your attitude is like, hell yeah, I want to be perfect, I want to be the best out there, then it's not such a hit to your ego and it's not so terrifying. It's just like, this is what we all want to go for. Let's do this, rather than like, oh, do I have to be perfect to go and play blackjack?
Yeah, it's like if you're getting the 98% on the test out module and you're hoping that that's enough, it's probably a sign that you're just a little too eager to play, because you're probably overlooking a lot of other things besides just how you're counting, like bankroll management. And I'm sure you're jumping the gun on things like that could just destroy you.
I know this is probably discouraging for some people to hear, but we want to tell it to people straight. Everybody I know that's a pro would have no problem with these standards. They're not trying to cut themselves short in any way. All right, moving on. If you learn basic strategy plus deviations for shoe games, is that sufficient for double deck?
Yeah, I would say yes. I think the biggest bang for your buck is adding in the insurance deviation for the double deck, the 2.5.
Yeah, I've run a lot of numbers. We actually just added different double deck basic strategy to the website because people want it. Here's the secret: like nobody knows this. It's not more valuable than, especially for counting. I've done double deck specific deviations, and it didn't move the needle. Like maybe we're talking 1%, but there's a lot of other ways to get another 1% out of the game. And so I would say yes, learn basic strategy, and then the deviations for shoe games, and then buy insurance at a true 2.5 rather than waiting for a true 3. It's funny because I was saying like it's not good enough if you're not perfect. People want to add all these extra things to their brain in these other ways that I would say don't bother with that. Just be perfect at the main things, and then you'll get the EV. That's my philosophy, and you can run the sims yourself and try to prove me wrong, but so far I've not been convinced that it's worth learning different charts for different number of decks. I would say an exception might be if you're playing a lot of single deck. There are some composition dependent decisions. Like think about if you've got a 14 against a 10 that consists of 2 7s. There's only 2 more 7s in the entire deck. And so it's going to be really hard to catch that other 7. I don't actually know those because I never focused on single deck, but I know Nichols played a lot of single deck and he learned some of those composition dependent decisions. There's only a few of them. If you're just going to play tons of single deck, then you could look into that.
Yeah, because the majority of the US is 6 deck, and I've never been a huge expanded deviation person. Only added a few here and there that were more for fun than it were for like extracting more value, because if I'm jumping around tables a little bit more that session, that's going to trump any additional little number I add on to my deviation chart here and there. Like it's just going to blow it out of the water. Me just being a little bit more aggressive or mobile, moving table to table.
Yeah, if you handed me a blank chart and I were to fill it out with deviations, I could probably do somewhere between 30 and 40, but it was the same thing. It was out of curiosity. I'd play some session and I'd have a monster count and I'd have an 8 against a 4 and I'd be like, should I have doubled? And then you look it up, you're like, I think it's true 6. Then, oh, okay, if I get a true 6, then I can double an 8 against a 4. But it's kind of the same thing. Like it adds 5% to your EV if you learn all of the expanded deviations, if I'm remembering that correctly. Like that's learning all of them. I don't know how many there are, maybe 80 to 100. That's a lot of numbers to, be running through for an extra 5%. And my concern is if you put in all the time and energy to learn those extra 40 or 60 deviations, you might play slower, 5% slower.
Yeah.
And cost yourself more EV by playing slower than if you would have just said, oh, I know these 20, maybe you add 10 more and play efficiently. That's my philosophy.
And how many of those are negative?
So that's another, we're going to do a full just talk about deviations podcast sometime soon. And some of the questions that were around deviations we'll save for that. But that is, why don't we have more negative deviations on our main chart? Well, it's because the way that we've played and trained people to play is to try to not play when it's true negative 3, 4, 5, 6. If you are playing, play a minimum bet. And now that is different than like Schlesinger, when he created Blackjack Attack, they played all. They never left the table. They played through all negative counts. And not only did they play through all negative counts, they used smaller bet spreads, like a 1-6. And when you're betting only a sixth of your max bet at negative counts, it's more important to use those deviations. Well, I would say you shouldn't be playing at a true, unless you have the bankroll to play through negative counts. In which case, if you have the bankroll to play through negative counts, you're not doing a 1-6 bet spread. You're doing a 1-20, at least 1-12, if not 1-20, 1-40, or in Joe748's case, 1-100 bet spread. In which case, those negative deviations are less and less valuable. So we're getting a little in the weeds there.
An entire deviation podcast. That's either going to be like people will love that, or it's a great podcast to try to fall asleep if you're having trouble falling asleep at night.
For 5% of our audience are going to love it. The other 95%, it's going to put them to sleep. Moving on. How does card counting work if you join the table in the middle of a shoe or slightly after the shoe started? This is really important if you're new to card counting. Joe, break it down.
Yeah, so I wouldn't start counting in the middle of a shoe. At the very most, let's say I go up to a table and they've started to deal through half of one deck. Then all I do is I add that half of one deck to the back of the shoe as if the penetration was a little bit worse than what it is. So if it's one deck cut off, now it's a 1.5 deck game cut off.
Yeah, so those cards, everything you miss when you show up and they've already started dealing, everything you missed is the exact same thing as the cards behind the cut card. The cards behind the cut card are cards that you will never see and you will never play. So if you show up one deck in, there's another deck on top of the, let's say it's a table that cuts off. Let's say it's a table that cuts off a deck. Well, that's really good pen. But if you show up a deck in, then there's 2 decks you will never play and never see. And I wouldn't advise people to play a game that cuts off 2 decks unless, the rules are just so good. Even then, it's pretty painful to play a game that cuts off 2 decks. So what Joe's saying is, if there's no other table to back count or play, then maybe he would start counting it if it's a half deck in, because then that's the equivalent of playing a table that's cutting off 1.5 decks, because there's the deck behind the cut card and the half deck that they already played before he got there. Well, what if they're normally cutting off a deck and a half and you show up half a deck in? Then that's the equivalent of a game that cuts off 2 decks, which we wouldn't play. So again, remember the goal as card counters isn't to play blackjack. The goal is to play positive EV hands of blackjack, to play quality hands of blackjack. And so, yeah, you want to play, but if you show up in the middle of the shoe, that's not a game worth playing. If you need to lock up the seat because it's full, you can sit there and you can bet minimum. Just say, hey, I'm going to waste however much the minimum bets are for half a shoe. But don't get in the habit of jumping into tables that have started anywhere past maybe missing the first round or 2. It would be my advice.
Yeah, and don't think the value of that as cover is going to override what you're going to get out of, you don't want to be playing a 600-hour N0 game with 2 decks cut off, it's not going to be worth the cover. Are they going to let you play for thousands of hours there? Maybe, but it's going to be a brutal time.
Well, and that's assuming that they know what we know, which they don't. If they back you off, it's like, someone's moving their bets. Oh no, back them off. And of course, don't be paranoid of that, but I'm just saying they're not very sophisticated. No offense, surveillance people listening to this. But You're probably not as sophisticated on average. Yeah, well, I guess if a surveillance person is listening to this, they're a little more sophisticated. And if you are listening to this, surveillance people, hey, we're just trying to make a little bit of money. You can't blame us. And, just look the other way for a while. Moving on. Okay. Betting strategies and bet spreads. When counting cards, what percentage of the bet should I increase when the count is high so the casino does not suspect me? So if I play $10 a hand and then 150, does that raise suspicion? Ooh. All right, let's hear the Joe748 answer. This is the 7-figure winning card counter Joe748 answer. It might not be everyone's answer, but don't dismiss it without being aware that he's made a lot of money doing this job. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I wish I knew exactly what percentage of increase would raise the suspicion. If we all knew that, we would make so much more. But the problem is we don't know what their threshold and opinion is for what looks weird to them. 10 to 150 could be totally fine at one property for many, many hours. 10 to 150 could be a huge red flag at a different property. So the best you can do is ask around, look on Casino 411, kind of get a gauge of their tolerance level of bet spreads. But even then, it could be shift dependent. You could have a guy on swing shift who's fine with that and another guy in the morning who's not. So I think you have to get rid of the, what is the max I should do to not get the suspicion, because you don't know what's suspicious to them. You need to focus more on what is high EV for me and appropriate risk, and then kind of take it from there. I mean, that's kind of been my approach the whole time. But then again, I also never had locals that I was preserving because I never lived somewhere with locals. So
yeah, if there was a simple answer to this question, we wouldn't have hundreds of backoffs. We would know exactly how to bet to not raise any suspicions, and we would do that forever. The problem is you hear someone raising their bet 1 to 3 and getting backed off, raising it from 10 to $30 and getting backed off. And then Joe and I have used bet spreads from $10 to $1,000 and gotten hours in at it. So there isn't a simple answer, but there are a few things to consider. One is your mileage may vary. One person could walk into a casino and use the exact same bet spread and last 10 times longer or 10 times shorter than another guy. Secondly, your act is part of it. If you just have card counter written all over you because you're shifty-eyed and you don't know how to blend into the casino, you're not going to last as long as if you have a really good act. Third, the casino matters. That's where Joe's saying, look it up on Casino 411 or whatever it may be. If we went down to Bellagio right now, let's say we were there Saturday night. There's a pit that's 3 to 2, and I've seen people betting $5,000 a hand in that pit. And if you're betting 150, not that they have a $10 table, but let's say you're wonging in at 150, you're not going to have any heat. You could sit there going, let's say that they have a $50 minimum table, go 50 to 2 spots of 400, something like that, probably without any heat because there are other people betting $5,000. If you go to Slots of Fun, if they had a 3 to 2 blackjack table, which they probably don't, you could go $10 to $50 and you're going to get backed off. So like Joe said, you got to kind of do your research. If it's a local, I totally understand treading lightly. But what we don't want to do is have so much fear around using a bet spread that we're making half the hourly EV to last twice as long. If your goal is to spend as many hours in a casino as possible, great, do that. If your goal is to get the money, then I would rather press my bets and last half as long, but make twice the money and get the same amount of money in half the time, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of the problem too is many casinos, it's not the spread that's the trigger for surveillance or the trigger for the pit to call surveillance. It's the win amount that session. So you could be spreading huge bet spread, but not win enough in that session to have the pit call surveillance to say, hey, this person's up $5,000. We have to do a skills check. That's usually how it works a lot of times.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a really small spread and then you just happen to run hot and you hit over that threshold, then you're going to get called upstairs anyway.
Yeah, I would guess that 90% of people listening to this are going to be playing their local casinos, in which case you can just try to feel it out. Look at how much other people are betting. But that is a really good point. Keep your wins to a minimum. Like, if I'm going to do anything at a local, it's going to be try to avoid large wins in a given night. But you could also try a smaller bet spread. If there's just zero heat, ramp it up a little bit. But also be aware. We just filmed a video yesterday on the different indicators of heat, but you've got to be aware of that stuff and get out of there if it's your local and you're getting heat. Because some people, it's not the best. They're getting heat for whatever reason. They're winning or the best spread, whatever. And then they've got no spidey senses for it. And then they get backed off, which is totally fine on a trip. It's a bummer if it's your local. So work on your act, your awareness, your recon, and try. You could start with a smaller bet spread, press it if there's no heat, and go from there.
And I'll end with this. There are just different triggers for the surveillance review. So it could be, if you're at an old school place, maybe it's, they're jumping their bet 5 times from their lowest bet, call upstairs. The other form is what we talked about, win amount. They're over a certain amount, 5,000, call upstairs. Some casinos are, if they're betting black, call upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Some are, if they're betting purple only, call upstairs. So there was that place where I was playing, they call upstairs for purple. So I bet 490 because I got a tip from another card counter who told me that works. And it was fine. And I had already been backed off at this place. I bet 490, 490, 490, no call upstairs, no back off.
That's so funny. Like when you said if you bet purple, so you said, so I bet, and I thought you were going to say 400. But no, I'm surprised you didn't do 499.
499.50 with the 50-cent piece.
Oh, that's so funny. We had a place in Washington that let us play however we wanted for years. And then they obviously made some decision upstairs and they backed off all of our players that were playing there regularly. But we heard that the biggest indicator was once they're bang purple, they had to call it out and then the pit would be alerted and then the pit might call upstairs or whatever. So we had people betting 2x400, 2x450, and the heat went way down.
I played one place where they had to call upstairs for every single purple bet. Not just for the one time in the session. It was every single bet they had to call. It was crazy.
That casino hates money.
Yeah.
What they're doing to their rounds per hour.
Yeah, and mine.
And yours. Yeah. More importantly, yours. But I'm just saying, they make these decisions that they think are plus EV. But I mean, with you, maybe it is. But why not just back people off that bet purple?
Yeah, or just giving me the phone number so I could just call them myself when I was betting just to speed things up.
That's ridiculous. Speaking of black chips, purple chips, our next question is, what environment differences can you expect when scaling from green to black chipping, and how do you adjust your play to work with it?
Definitely more heat, for sure. More heat, but the biggest positive of doing that is I also get less heat from the players.
Yes.
Less harassment, less them telling me what to do or why am I doing this or doing that. When I'm betting black and purple versus when I was betting green, no one questioned me when I was betting a lot of black.
Yeah, everybody knows more than you at the blackjack table till you're betting more than them, and then all of a sudden they're not going to. I mean, sometimes you still get people, you're betting, 2 spots of 1,000 and they're like giving you crap for hitting a 12 against a 2 or 3. But I think the other thing is you get access to better conditions generally, meaning less crowded of tables. And, sometimes you get to the $100 minimum table and it's stand 17 instead of hit 17. That also might be in a high limit room. And so you have to decide, do you want the scrutiny that comes with being in a high limit room or not? Sometimes the high limit room is amazing compared to the main floor. Other times it's like you're the only person in there. The pit boss has nothing to do but watch you, and it can be a problem. So I agree generally there's more heat. That's the thing. When you start out as a card counter, you're betting small and not everybody. I know some people get a back off right away, but you might go 100 hours before your first back off and you're like, oh, if only I could bet black. Well, enjoy that time where you can just focus on playing the game and not the heat part of it. But those are the big things, bigger financial swings, of course. But I also think you can start to get a little more creative with the bet spreads. Sometimes when you get to black, like an all black bet spread, sometimes if you're getting better table, stand 17, decent pen, you might be able to not have to use as massive of a bet spread. But then if you are using a big bet spread, you get more CTRs. And that's really a problem. We talk about that at boot camps and the things you can do legally to, minimize the number of CTRs, chip inventory, basically. But that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, the biggest downside of the green is just the crowded tables. That's just the worst.
Yeah, unless it's a place that it's the $25 tables are less crowded. I don't know. I mean, $25 tables 20 years ago when I was playing full time is probably closer to a $50 table as far as inflation. So, $25 tables might not be as empty nowadays. I mean, yeah, when I go to Bellagio, if I want a decent 3-2, it's probably $50 min instead of $25 min. But, I could find those and they're fairly empty. And if you've got the bankroll to play through it, it's kind of a nice thing if there's like one other player. You can leave the table if it goes negative. If it's heads up, you got to decide if you're going to like leave and hope they shuffle, find another table, or see if you actually have the bankroll to play through it. If you're only a green chipper, you probably don't have the bankroll to play through all negatives at a 25, definitely not a $50 table.
I would also say when you graduate up to black, you're less surprised about short-term things that happen at the table. I mean, the losing, it still affects you and you still get discouraged. But I remember when I was betting green, these things would happen at the table, all these splits and double downs on a super high count. And I would be so upset at that one hand to just be like, why? How did that happen? Why? But then when I started betting black, it was just, I've seen it so many times at that point. It was just like, well, that's business as usual. Next hand, you're still going to get affected by swings, like emotionally, but
you've more or less seen it all by then. All right. What percentage of shoes actually go positive? It feels like I never get a positive shoe. Do you know the answer to this?
I think we can all relate. Around 30-something%?
Yeah, it's like between 25 and 35. Depends on the game. But in the pro betting software, you can click on a little thing. There's all the bet spreads are to the right. Then there's a green plus sign. If you click on it, it shows the percentage of every true count. And so we've got about 11% is true -3 and below, 8% is -2, so that's 19%, 12% for true -1, so that's 19 plus 12 is 31, and then 0 is 44%. So 31 and 44 gives us 77, so that means 23%. And this is with really bad rules and all that stuff. If we go to double deck, it's a lot lower. Let's see, 30, 40, 50, 60. So it's, like I said, between 20 and 30-ish% of the hands are above a true 1. And so you might feel like you're never getting a positive count, but if you're expecting every shoe to be half the time positive, it's not, because, it's like basically more or less a third of the time it's 0, a third of the time it's below -1, a third of the time it's above true 1, give or take 10%.
Yeah, the longest I waited for a positive count was 2 hours on a double deck game, which was like, it just seemed like so long. But also the pen wasn't amazing, so that's also could have factored into it.
That's true. You get better pen, you're definitely going to get a lot more positive counts because you don't need as high of a running count to have a true 1 when there's only a deck left or half a deck left. But there's that variance where you could get 5 shoes in a row that go positive in deck 1 and stay all shoe, and then you can go, 5 hours without getting a good count. It's all just generating EV.
Does the -3 in pro betting software include counts below true negative?
Yeah, so I actually just kind of hinted at that in the last answer. So the pro betting software, the first count it has is -3, and I believe if you hover over it, it actually says -3 and below, but if it doesn't say that when you hover over it, yes, it's true -3 and below that. You should be at your minimum bet by true -3 or betting 0 by true -3. You shouldn't still be decreasing your bet spread below that. And so we don't have fields for that, partially just like user experience. If it's got like 20 fields, the screen's going to be hard to work with. But yes, that's what it means, -3 and below. And it's the same for The highest true count we have is 7, and that actually means true 7 and above. So if you look at the percentages, it's like the percentages go up -3 and +7. Well, that's because it's those true counts and greater or less than.
Is there a way of determining how often the true count is able to recover from positive to negative? For example, if a double deck game with 50 or 60% pen starts off at a running -6 after 13 cards have been dealt, what is the likelihood of that shoe reaching as true 3 or higher?
There probably is some mathematical way, but the reality is it's very unlikely. So here's the deal. Anyone who's counted cards has been there where it tanks, the count tanks, and we're like, well, maybe it'll turn around. But there's 2 issues with that. I always say this at every boot camp. There's 2 problems with this. One is the odds of it turning around is very low. Secondly, the cost for playing those negative true counts as it goes from true -6 to -5 to -4 to -3 and -2, -1 back to 0, you're paying so much money playing those hands. You're better off not playing them unless you have a huge bankroll and you can afford to play through all negative counts. But if there's anyone else at the table that is willing to grind through those negative counts for you, that is the time to change tables or take a bathroom break or, walk around the casino checking things out or anything other than playing those really expensive negative counts, hoping that the count turns around quickly.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's definitely not over 50% of the time. It jumps back around. So in that case, it's a negative value to say.
Yes.
With the exception of looking at the other options in the pit. If there are no other better options and the best option is to stay and play through the negatives, if your bankroll allows it, then that's the right.
Which to me would only be if I'm heads up.
Yeah.
And I know, okay, yeah, this is still a negative EV situation to play through this, but it's because it's the best option to get to the next shoe, which will be positive EV. But again, I said earlier in the podcast, our goal is not to play rounds of blackjack. Our goal is to play positive rounds of blackjack. And so don't get comfortable, feel the pain every negative hand that you play. It should hurt to play through with those negative true counts, and you're only doing it if you have no other options, which I'm saying, yeah, get up and walk around. I just want to reiterate, don't sit there and hawk the table, jumping in and out. I mean, you can, but you're going to stand out. You're probably going to get backed off faster. You're going to irritate the dealer and the players. I've done it in a way where it's the only table in the casino. And I'm like, they know, oh, I'm there to play blackjack. But I'm like, oh, this shoe's no good. Well, there's nowhere else to go. It's like a tiny casino, nowhere else to go. And I'm like, oh, I'm just watching the game and I'm looking up at the TV. But even then, I'd probably be better off just like walking around and doing something else for 5 minutes than sitting at the table, definitely not staring at the cards and saying, you guys play and I'll jump in when I want to play. That's being a nit at the table. All right, we got a few more questions for this Mailbag podcast episode. Actually, just a few questions about wonging and table selection. So, question is, should we focus on larger or smaller casinos on average, as it is, of course, a case-by-case basis? Larger or smaller casinos? What say you, Joe748?
I want to quote Nichols here because he had a great quote the last time we were all hanging out, and he said something to the effect of, the smellier the casino is, the more valuable it is. And it's pretty true. I mean, if I see a tiny place and I know it has blackjack in there, I get way more excited about that than some big extravagant casino that's huge. Like I don't look forward to those.
The gas station casino, literally in the middle of nowhere, where the pit boss has a fly swatter hanging from his belt. That's my jam.
Yeah.
That's my aria or my fountain blue or whatever. Because the odds of them being really sharp is a lot lower. That being said, there are advantages to large casinos. I mentioned Bellagio. I should probably stop mentioning the same casino. The proverbial Bellagio. I feel like I could pop in there and play a few shoes because other people are betting so much money. Like I said earlier, I could pop in for a couple shoes. I feel like every trip. But it's almost like it's the wrong question. No offense, whoever asked the question. I agree. Smaller, there's more likelihood of inexperienced, untrained staff. But I don't think it's just larger and smaller. You got to do your research because there are small places that are just total sweatshops. And there are large places that are going to database you and flyer you. And then there are large places that it's so big you can pop around. I'm thinking of some of the big places on the East Coast that you could pop around for a long time. And then there are those super valuable diamond in the rough small places. So you got to do your research. I think this is a thing that, especially people that haven't I don't know how to put it. They stop their training at the fundamental basics, +1, -1, basic strategy deviations. Well, your training's not done when you can pass the test out. If you want to get a lot of hours in at this, your training continues into learning how to do research, learning how to have a good act, all that stuff. But part of it is the research that large or small, what do other people say about it? Is it a sweatshop or can you get the hours in?
Yeah, and usually the bigger places, they are going to have better conditions than the smaller, tiny places. Conditions as far as the rules, and the pen sometimes is usually better at those big places because they've done all the analysis of this makes us more money, and they've have outside consultants come in and they do it. But a small place, it's kind of a wild card.
Yeah.
That can be great. The other thing is with the small places, it could be so small that they just can't handle the max bets.
That's true.
And there's no heat. They don't think you're a card counter, but they just literally can't offset the money.
Yeah.
With everyone else playing $5.
We've had casinos have to write us checks because they didn't have enough cash when we hit them for, 25 grand or whatever. We had a place back someone on our team off and said, I'm sorry, we just can't handle you right now, but come back in a month and we might have the money to handle you. All right, moving on. What do you do if another card counter sits at your table?
Oh, we've all been there, huh?
Yeah. We've talked about we need a secret, handshake. I know some people have started to say, do you know Colin? Which cracks me up. We need something, maybe not Colin. Maybe it's oh, Ed Thorpe? Is that you? But I would say the first thing is don't keep playing at their table. And why? Why, Joe?
It just looks way too weird when two people are simultaneously raising their bets at the same time, lowering their bets at the same time. It's just too awkward.
Yes. And secondly, you really are taking each other's cards. If Joe and I count at the same table versus counting at two different tables, we're not having to share those good counts with each other because every card is valuable in those. That's part of why it's better to not play a full table. Also rounds per hour. And if we're at the same table, we're slowing each other down. There's a financial reason not to do it, but there's also a heat reason. It does. It just really stands out. And so what I would tend to do is some sort of indication oh, I like the way you play, or, you play like me or something like that. Then see if they could meet, bathroom, there's no cameras in the bathroom to just talk for a few minutes and maybe even exchange info. One of the main people on the first team I was on, it was this sort of a situation. We exchanged info, met up, and decided to team up or whatever. It's just good to have another connection. And then maybe you even work out a schedule. I've done that before. We had this valuable promotion with an edge off the top. We show up at the same time as two other card counters. It was two of us and two of them, and they had two tables. So we worked out a schedule where we played these 8 hours, they played these other 8 hours.
The other thing about heat is you don't know how much heat they have and
That's
they're
true.
bringing to you. Let's say they were playing all day yesterday and they got a bunch of heat and surveillance reviews and they come sit down at your table. They see you're betting the same. Now you're going to be linked with that person. That happens all the time. Databases will link people who don't even know each other, but they're both counting at the same property.
This is not directly related to that, but it's still a fun story. There was someone on our team that was playing, I want to say Palms, with Matt Damon, however many years ago, in the high limit room. And the person's like, this is amazing, spreading from 2 spots of 100 to 2 spots of 2,000 at the same table with him. No heat. As soon as Matt Damon left, they backed him off. He actually took the heat away from them. They didn't want to back him off while Damon's playing at the table. But yeah, that's a really good point. You don't know what kind of heat the other person has, and you don't want them bringing heat on you. And if you believe in do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, you don't want to bring heat on them unnecessarily. Next question. Speaking of wonging in and out, I don't know where we're speaking of it, but does this not raise any red flags to the floor or security? I mean, security, I don't think security is paying any attention to you, but maybe they mean the floor or the dealer. I would say wonging in and wonging out is an art form or a skill. And I think one of my concerns, kind of like that sitting at the table hawking, jumping in and out, sitting in a chair at the table. I'm afraid that some people that are maybe like self-training, they watch some videos and they try to figure it out on their own. They don't have this full training of knowing how to do this stuff. And so I've talked in our video course about how to wong in and out. I mean, there is a YouTube video. Actually, there's a YouTube video. So even if they've been through the videos, watch that video. There's a way to do it that does look super odd. There's a way to do it that looks natural. And I don't really want to get into all the details here in this podcast, but use your brain. Look at the way other gamblers act. There are other players that they don't just sit at a table, they wong in and out, and try to be natural about it. That's my best advice.
Yeah, it is so property dependent, and it's also linked to your max bet. So wonging in and out, if you're starting out early with a small bankroll, but your max bet isn't very high, it's not going to raise any suspicion. It's possible it won't raise any suspicion at all because they don't care about your max bet. So in that scenario, I would encourage you to wong in and out as much as possible if you have a micro bankroll.
You know what? I don't have a micro bankroll. And last time I played the Vegas Strip, or if we went later today to the Vegas Strip, I would not just go sit down at the first table I find. There's no reason to sit down. If I could walk around, find a table that's just shuffling, someone else is playing it, and I'm just curious. They have no reason to think anything about you at this point. I'm just looking, and I'm not just staring at the table. I might, in between rounds, be paying attention to something else, and then never miss a card. And then if it gets to a true 1.5, or maybe I wait for a true 2 even, oh yeah, hey, mind if I join you? And I'm not waiting for them to say, sure, I just mind if I join you? And I sit down and I start playing. 1, I don't think there's anything odd about that. And 2, there's no reason for me to play negative EV bets when I could let someone else do it for me that first shoe of a session. Maybe I don't wong out, if the shoe ends, maybe I don't just stand up and then start hawking it again. Maybe I'm going to start the next shoe, but if I had a small bankroll, then I'd walk away and I'd find something else to back count or if we were somewhere that had a bunch of tables, I just do that. Shoe after shoe, I walk around and I try to blend in with the other gamblers.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, as soon as I sit down at the table, I'm usually looking around for the next place I'm going to go to before the shoe even starts. I like to wong out and then immediately go to the next table over that's just started. So I'm not kind of wonging out, standing around, looking around, jumping in when it's hot. I'll wong out, but then I'll wong into the beginning of a shuffle versus wonging out, standing behind another table and then jumping in when it's positive. Because then it kind of just looks like, oh, I'm sick of this shoe. I just want a fresh start somewhere else.
Exactly. All right, that's all we have time for this Mailbag episode. If you want to learn more, you really should consider joining us as a member at Blackjack Apprenticeship, where we have a community and having these discussions all the time. If you are a member, thank you. And we will catch you guys next time.